But obviously, we're not the only ones who use AI, and our organizations are starting to use it more and more as well. And it is, in fact, changing the landscape of how we do what we do. And to be aware of more things is really important because it's not just us using the AI and perhaps using, as we've learned so much about how to optimize ChatGPT or Copilot, what have you. But then also when the organization is using it, the other vendors that we're working with are starting to use AI. How might that actually impact what we do and what we're actually accountable for? So let's talk about that. And we're going to get, like I said, very much into the weeds. We're going to go into a very, very specific example where we need to be aware of how AI works and what that means for what we're producing and really also the ownership. So what sits on our shoulders, what we're actually accountable for. So that's why we go into this particular piece here, and I'm sharing my screen specifically to talk about subjects like this as governing AI on the product roadmap. So as we're building for the future, what we're going to be implementing, there's a governance that has to go with it to make sure that what we put in is actually aligning to what we do and what we need to do and stay safe with. So that's why we call operationalizing the ethics and the privacy. So we have the workflows themselves. So I'm going to go through these slides, more slides than I should, but let's see how we can go through a few of these. First of all, to understand right away that just because we have approval to do something, the conditions are constantly changing. And what that means is what's available today will adjust on time. And what it's actually adjusted already and will continue to adjust. And so there's very basic principles that we need to hold to. And we need to understand sort of the environment also that we're operating in so that we make the right decisions around it. And so just because we have an approval, here is your green stamp to go ahead and start building, it doesn't necessarily mean it obviously is not the finish line, right? And so we're going to go into the weeds very specifically on a particular piece. And let's just pretend that what we need to do is summarize a conversation, okay? And provide whatever that may be because of the summary. It could be work there that goes on because of that. It could be a sentiment analysis that goes with it, intent analysis, all of that. And all of that is thanks to AI. So that's really good that we can have that today. But what does that mean when I'm actually implementing it? So yes, we're going to get very, very specific, but just using this as an example of how to be very, very careful with what it is that we're actually producing. So we're looking here for specifically about what may be coming up. So we're going to do a look two different paths. First of all, the summary. But then as you notice here on this particular slide, as we get forward, then, oh, now we have sentiment analysis. We have emotion inference. Now we have automated case routing based on those pieces. And as you can see in the bullet that I put up there, uh-oh, we have red flags going off all of a sudden. So what does that mean for us? And summarization actually is something that so much of our AI tools are starting to do. Well, they've been doing for quite a while now today. I'm using Plod, thanks to my friend John, who introduced me to it. And I absolutely love it. And it's fantastic. But it certainly isn't the only summarization tool that we have. And many are using Copilot for summaries. And now, of course, even Apple, I saw yesterday in the notes book, you can summarize and it captures all the transcriptions and everything. And that's just one piece, right? Because transcribing data is really just copying text to or speech to text. So now you have it all copied there down. All right, so now what AI can do is read it and then provide a summary based on what it's reading. Oh, but now as we see here in this slide, we can then move on to discuss, well, what was the sentiment as captured by the words used, the voice used? What was the emotion that was captured? And then based on that, how might I conclude with something else? And that's the automated case routing that we put here. So just because we have approval for summarization as one example, there will continue to be updates and add-ons. How we manage those is actually very, very careful. So let's take a look at exactly what we need to do for each piece of that so that we're very, very careful. Now, as we do, when we talk about this, we go into the details of, okay, what are the laws today? So yes, January 2026, the laws for Canadian government basically collapsed. And so we have older baselines, but we still don't have today's laws. And so what that means is that, as I've written down here, the standard we hold ourselves to Folks, that is the standard that we have today. Okay. So that means that we have to be so well aware of what it is that we're doing and the principles that we are following so that by the time the law actually does come in place, we're already following it. We're already doing what should be done. Okay. But that does mean, of course, that there is no federal AI law that we need to be following in order to adhere to, okay, from a governance perspective, but really it is what we are putting in ourselves as of today. So just kind of throw that out there because it does add a bit of complexity to what we do. And knowing, of course, when I ask a ton of questions, what if, what if, what if, I may not get the answers that I'm actually looking for because the laws themselves don't actually exist. And what the government is doing today is relying on past laws, okay? Law 25, the Bill C-27, various laws that we even have across Quebec as well. So just to be aware of all of those pieces, and this goes into a little bit more background as to what all of this is, but how those are being managed today and what we need to be aware of as we put on all of these laws. Okay, so I'm not going to get into those details of those laws, but know that many of them exist and certainly the principles are already there. We also, of course, have the EU AI Act. However, that is not actually being enforced until a little bit later on, and even some pieces for Canada as well, not until a little bit later on. But still, to be aware of what's there is absolutely critical, and what's coming, that's for sure. To pay attention on the global level is critical. So, as we talk about laws, though, okay, and principles that we're using, this slide really speaks to the principles. Okay, what are they based on, and then what do we do about it? And that's really what you see across the top here. So, what are those principles? And then, all right, so what do they speak to? When we talk about a client harm, to be aware of those pieces, if it requires thought, right? It's not just a law and a number that goes with it, but what does it actually mean, and how can I apply it? And could it affect with our clients, with ourselves, anything that we're doing about it? And then what is that control that has been put into place to give it the check? And that's really what we're here to do, right? To define, well, what is that control? And I need to be aware then what controls are available that would help support or prevent the harm to the client. Okay. So it's not just philosophical, it's not abstract, it's actually very, very specific. And so we need to be aware of what these are so that we can be very clear then on what we're looking to accomplish. And let's say we're talking with our vendors then or our builders, okay, then maybe they are not thinking about a particular thing, and then we can bring it to their attention. And here's why. This is the harm that I'm concerned about, or this is the area of concern. That's what I need to address. What is the control around this one particular piece? And that is based on, yes, a principle, right? So the principle maps directly to the concrete harm, okay? And then it's mitigated by demonstrable operational control, whatever that may be. So I hope you're with me through that. I would assume so. You've built in the past, you know what you're doing, okay?
And
So
we got a couple
this is,
questions. We got a
sure,
couple questions. Just
yeah,
I think
by all
it
means.
fits at this spot. So one question from Ellis is there any regulation that prevents people from taking my personal pictures in social media and using them in an AI tool without my consent? That's from Ellis.
So use without your consent, yes, absolutely. Those laws exist today. Okay, using them in an AI pattern doesn't change the law. Use period without your consent is already a law. And so that's the base principle that needs to now be applied to whatever we do with AI. Does that answer the
Okay.
question?
Ellis, you
Kind
want to
of.
unmute?
Thanks. Yes.
Okay, Hervé
Yeah.
has one more. He says, are there any laws that the feds are preparing now, or they are, I just lost it there, are now, or they are okay with this gap?
No, they're not okay with the gap. I would say that for sure. There was some government issues that really came up earlier this year when there was some suspensions, and so hence why I had that collapsing bridge, because what was all put on the table was ready to be discussed, agreed on, and put out. It was all based on the EU AI Act, by the way, and so we'll talk about that in a second. However, due to some other uncontrollable government issues, that collapsed. Okay. Will it come back? Of course it will. Is it? Yes. When and how? Hey, TBD, right? But it's important that we understand that it is based on the EU AI Act, and actually, it's very interesting because I was very much involved with that when it first came out, and it was very interesting because the EU was actually quite far behind in its use of the AI period. And when it saw North America coming up, Asia coming up, and Europe still sitting down here, the first step that it did was come out with the act that says this is how we are to use it. However, it hasn't actually been enforcing it as yet. And so a lot of the companies that are in the EU and ones that I've worked with, they know they will need to apply it and implement it. However, they haven't yet. And so that's kind of where we are, I would say, globally, is that the laws are coming in. The enforcement of them has yet to be exactly defined. However, Canada has said they will be following very closely the EU AI Act. Now, what that means, let's see. We're not sure yet. But if we follow and understand the EU AI Act and its principles that it's based on, we will see very much the same thing in the Canadian one. I hope that answers the question.
So Ben, would you say that
For
like
sure.
the EU is kind of the most conservative, like it's the most
Oh,
kind
definitely.
of
Yeah.
protective of kind of the people's rights kind of thing in terms of a spectrum, or what do you think?
1000%. Yeah, absolutely. Taking all
Yeah.
of that into consideration. And I will say, even one thing that really stood out to me was the requirement that all employees that are working in the EU or that whatever they produce has an impact on the EU property or people, EU people,
Hmm.
have to be educated on AI, the use, the dangers, the risks, dangers, risks, same word, um, but the impact that could be there, the depth of the use of the AI. And so that's quite interesting because that actually means that if Canada were to implement something of that same depth, we would all actually be required to pass the tests for AI and prove to the government that we are actually educated. So that comes with tests that go with it. So yeah, like I said, to be
So
seen.
so part of the
However,
grade
on the
eight and
EU
grade
side, it's actually very deep.
so part of the high school and public school curriculum is going to be proof that we know how to use AI. Is that what you're saying? Like your kid and
No,
my kid? No?
no, it'll be on the introductory training sessions for every company you go to work with.
Ah, there. Okay,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
yeah.
Andrea has another question. She said, "Are there any laws that specify what type of a use of an AI output that includes client data can be
Yes.
used?" Rahul mentioned PEPIDA. What are
Yeah,
your
so there is
thoughts?
a purpose limitation rule under Privacy Act, PIPEDA, that would govern here. That tells you for exactly what purpose that information, the client information or any other information would be used, and it would come under that category, Andrea.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
Makes
so
sense.
sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry, Ben, you agree or any other thoughts or?
No, but that's just it, is those existing laws and control mechanisms are already in place for certain pieces of it. It will continue to get refined as the options and possibilities with AI are now out there. And so
Yeah,
we're gonna sorry, go ahead.
Andrea?
I'm aware of that act, but I thought that there was like my question was like if there's anything else like preventing for us to use on a specific AI outputs because that's that it's prior to AI.
That's right.
Yeah.
What
Exactly. So
one of the things,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, Ben.
No, so that I'm aware of at this stage specific to AI, no. We don't have that says here in this realm, this is where it needs to be done. However, it is using that as the backbone in order for it to, like that law has not changed.
And in general, Andrea, the easiest way to know is look at Quebec law.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Ben, what your thoughts are here, but my experience is that Quebec is the most protectionist.
Yeah.
They're the highest level,
Yeah.
of, protectionism. So if it applies in Quebec, you're safe to assume that you'll never get in trouble with the rest of Canada.
That's very true. And as a matter of fact, many of the builders today are using that as a guideline. And they're using that because they know that it will help them in the future.
It
But we're
must
going
be
to talk
because
about a few.
they're
Sorry,
they're
go ahead, John.
French, right? They're closer to the European Union, so that kind of aligns, yeah, or no?
I'm sure they'd love to imagine so, but you know what? That's a whole other topic of
Sure.
conversation.
We'll park the politics. Okay, back to you. Keep going.
Yeah, sorry guys, I'm on a tight timeline today, so I gotta go through it. But thank you so much for all your questions, and I know there's a lot more. I will absolutely make myself available afterwards to go through some of the more specifics. But I wanted to call out some of these pieces here, just so that we're very well aware of what AI does and what we need to be aware of so that how do we control it? So, for example, fairness and non-discrimination. All right, so that's a principle. Great, absolutely, yes. What is the harm? Well, as AI listens to speech, it can easily degrade because of the accent that's being used. Welcome to Canada, okay? The dialects that are used. Welcome to so many other countries, okay? Especially English as a second language speakers. Is it capturing everything? Okay. Then when it actually provides a summary, well, it inherits all that bias that goes into it, right? Or errors that go with it. And so that the quality of that record then comes down. And why? Well, for certain demographic groups. Okay. So we're aware that because of this and this and this, oh, our summary is not as clean as it should be. So what do? Well, in our controls, we want to make sure that we are actually testing across the distinct demographic segments, not just aggregates, okay, but across each one so that we can have a clean output, okay? Also, another principle, transparency needs to be very clear across, okay? So, affected parties, as it says, don't realize that AI is shaping their service or their record. Okay, do they have access to that? So first of all, as we say here, mandatory disclosure. Yes, AI is in the picture here. But then can we actually produce it as needed, as asked in a realistic way? Also, anyone who's using it needs to know that what I'm looking at is AI generated. Could be wrong, right? What do I do then about that? Okay, and me as the human in the loop, what am I doing about that information? Am I correcting as needed, or am I simply clicking? Yep, good to go. I'm going to go on to the next slide because again, now we have we define accountability. Okay, and why? Well, because the vendor, all right, we assume that they own the risk. So whatever they're going to do and produce, they're going to be aligning to the risk that is already in place within our organization. Okay. However, we've talked very specifically about putting this in a banking environment. Well, as I've said very clearly here, under OSFI, they actually own the output, which means that the bank or any organization that takes it on from the vendor, now they have control and ownership of the output. Okay. So that means that whatever vendor contracts we have with them, we need to make sure that they are following what we want within our organization, what our rules are and our decisions are, okay, whether it aligns to government or not, law or not, we are still, again, putting that law into place ourselves. As long as we're following it, great, and the vendor has to follow the same. Now, we're going to get into some sticky details here about AI because perhaps the vendor themselves may be aligned, but if they're then going outside and using an AI to do certain pieces of what they do and then produce that, we're still accountable at the end of the day for whatever has been produced, and then we own it and we're sending it out, okay? So here we have explainability now, this other piece, all right? So we talked about accountability and now we're into explainability. What is that? To be actually able to explain what it is and how it works. How is it coming to the conclusion that it is? Well, let's use this as a summarization example versus a credit decision, okay, in a larger organization, all right? So a summarizer is very simple, isn't it? And it's perhaps, it just produces that summary, but then it also then goes into intent, it goes into inference, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now you go over to a credit decision model. So a credit decision model, yeah, it seems to be complex. However, it's very finite. In other words, it goes here because of this and this and this. These are this is the data that it uses to come to that conclusion. But then if you ask your summarizer to tell me, how did you determine that the client was angry? I don't know. How did you determine that the client was being defensive? I don't know. Okay, so this is where we need to actually be able to explain what our tools are doing and the conclusions that they're coming to, and maybe we can't. This is why we need to be very, very clear with our vendors as to be able to, for them to explain the outcome and how and why, so that the average person, you know, without having all this depth of AI knowledge and understanding, can actually explain how it's being used because the client deserves to understand. Going into the next slide, just sort of kind of where we were before and where we are today, okay? And I will actually jump down to, I think one of the ones that actually really clarifies this is the re-identification versus de-identification. Okay, so before we had AI, de-identification was perhaps the 15 or 20 pieces of information that we had about a particular client that we could then remove so that we can use it to enhance our systems or even test or whatever, right? Okay, so that now it's very generic and we've now taken all of those PII pieces out, okay? Great. Now with AI, however, it is mapping so much more around that particular piece of information, or that particular client, and that gets attached to the client. So now AI is actually designed to go around the loop and infer. And so based on this information and this information and this information, and this is the natural next conclusion. So if an AI is able to do that, suddenly if we take data away, well, maybe then it's very likely able to still conclude and say, yeah, this is your client. I am 99.9% sure that this is the client based on all the other information. Now, we could be talking about the words that they use in their speech, how they talk, the things that they talk about, where they're physically located, what the temperature was that day. All of those pieces of information will go to that particular person, and it's like a fingerprint for that particular piece. AI can do that, and it can do it at a rapid pace versus anything that could do it before. And so now we need to understand, well, how are you taking away information and how are you using it to perhaps train your model? We need to be aware of these pieces because as we're using data, we need to understand that our traditional way of de-identifying data is out the window, okay? And it needs to be now applied to the use of AI. So that's perhaps a whole other conversation, but I think it goes to the point of really what is inference and what can that mean if we are attaching it then to a particular client interaction, okay? So what gets attached to the client? Where does it stay? What can the client themselves have access to see it and be aware of? When they ask for it, can they see it? How do they ask for it? How do we display it? All of that needs to be well defined so that we're clear with our clients on it. Okay, so again, personal information, and this is really AI manufacturing it. Okay, we can have new records, we can have inference that goes with it. And so look, for example, here at what this does is you have the transcript or a summary of what took place, okay? Goes through the LLM, you have the artifact that goes with it, okay? A brand new record of that conversation, okay? We define then how long we're going to keep it for, what do we remove it for, who has access to it, etc. Okay? The part underneath this here is now inference that can go with it. The sentiment. I already talked about some of these pieces, right? Psychological attribute that the client never provided. They never said themselves, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling angry, I don't like what you just said, I don't think this is accurate. However, if because the transcript and the way it was all said is now inferring a sentiment that goes with it, highly sensitive, highly personal, not factual. It's an inference, okay? And so again, notice at the bottom here, if we're going across the border, well, we have to be also, again, very, very careful, right? So if we have to be aware of what laws exist, where that is, so that we're very careful of what exactly we are capturing and how we are holding it and who has access to it, okay? So here it is then blown out, okay? Here in the middle, we have now a summary of a call and the sentiment that gets put onto it by the AI, okay? They are aggressive, they are frustrated, okay? Now look at the principles that go around this, okay? For any of our laws that exist. Is it fair? Well, maybe it was skewed because of the accent or the dialect, okay? And it misread it. Who's accountable for it? Okay, well, it's not the vendor, all right? The consequence then is owned by the bank. Is it explainable? Why? Why did you come to that conclusion? I don't know. As it says here, it's practically unanswerable. Is there privacy there? Is there new highly sensitive inferred personal identification information? And then what about the oversight itself? Who's actually looking at it and defining, is it correct or is it not? The human in the loop. So this is why sentiment inference is a subjective guess dressed as an objective fact. This is what it was. This conversation was with a client who is aggressive, who is frustrated. That's an objective fact that goes with it. that it's a subjective guess. It's not necessarily correct. And so that's why something like this trips almost every ethical and regulatory trigger simultaneously, all at once, through all of this. And we may think, oh, you know what? Great, vendors coming out with this. Let's see what we can do. Please be careful then on what exactly is being produced as a result. Okay. And this is exactly what we talk about, right? So the vendor ships their sentiment analysis. Okay, great. Now we have it. Wait. It's not quiet configuration toggle. Oh, look at this. Now we have it. What else goes with it? Okay. And so this is where now, hey, maybe we need to actually re-identify what all is happening with this information and how it's maybe a simple, very simple thing that they're adding to it, which we know sentiment has been out there now for a long time. However, if they just say, yeah, now you can do it, there's a ton of questions that now need to be asked. And now you have a new initiative risk assessment that needs to be taking place to go through it very much in detail. So
Ben, a question.
John,
So if in general terms, AI, they could push something, they could push a change to their model or this or that. In terms of anthropomizing the kind of the system, it's kind of like what, a genius assistant? Or like you can't just sounds like it trust it to do it perfectly, right? Like you're ultimately liable when you hit send, or whether it goes to a customer, whether it goes to internal or Copilot brings you back something. Like it sounds like you're still ultimately legally, responsible for whatever you send. You can't just say, oh, it was my AI.
Yeah.
Like just like you can't say, hey, it was my subordinate that sent this presentation to the CEO.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or what do you think?
No, absolutely. Like, so, and the question came up from Ellis earlier today, like, okay, do we have the AI piece around how they use my personal information? Well, the question now with AI needs to be asked is, what is my personal information? Did I come across as being angry in a conversation? Did I come across as being defensive or aggressive or whatever? And is that being tied into who I am? And so again, like, who owns that? Well, whoever attached it is the one who owns it, and it's not the vendor. It's again, where is the human in the loop that actually identifies this, and what is it being attached to for how long? Does the client have access to that, and can they change it if needed? What do we do about it? What if it changes the outcome of what we do with that information? So now, because they're aggressive, I'm all of a sudden going to escalate it. Should I? Should it go to the top of the queue, or can it go in here? You know what I mean? Like, how we behave with all that information now because of that inference needs to be very carefully managed, not just because we can. This is actually, when I was thinking about this presentation today, I was thinking about a great quote from Jurassic Park that I'm sure all of us will remember. Where one of the characters looks at the one who was actually running the park and started the park, and he said, "You stood on the shoulders of geniuses, and you never asked it what we should do, or what we can do is what we should do." And that's, I think, really, again, here for something like this, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And this is where we actually need to ask a bunch of additional questions and go with it.
And for those of you too young, Jurassic Park is a movie about dinosaurs that Ben and myself and Rahul know, but just throwing that out there. Okay.
Wow, wow, just like that.
Well,
and John has more white hair.
We've got the gray hair.
But,
we've got the gray hair. So we're at 2:30. We're welcome for anybody to be able to stay. Ben, if you want to continue, no rush. But if anybody drops off, we understand. We'll record this. We'll edit it. We'll put it on YouTube. So back to you, Ben.
Yeah, let me very quickly just go through these slides because I think they're so critical, and I really only have a few more. But really, we talk about human in the loop versus on the loop versus over the loop. Okay, and in the loop means that for every decision that is made, they are there and they're defining what and how. Okay, every time. When they're on the loop, they're perhaps overseeing it, and for once in a while, they are actually addressing pieces of it, so that yes, every now and then I'm looking at it according to a defined schedule. Yes, I'm still on the loop, but I'm not in the loop. So that's a little bit easier. Over the loop, I'm just overseeing it. I'm not actually, it's going out as it is done. And again, as we go through these stages, we need to be very, very sure of what is going out before we even move to an on the loop and then an over the loop. Okay. I personally have never implemented over the loop. I have implemented up to on the loop, but never over. And I, on purpose, don't do that. And I never recommend it, as a matter of fact. Will we get there? Probably. How? That needs to be defined. Okay. But again, if you have anything that's being described as human or no human, please, red flag. okay? Because no human should never really exist, okay? So this is, again, goes into a little bit more, and I'll skip over that piece of it, but this is where, again, we need to be very, very careful. So I think that really wraps up everything that I wanted to share with everybody today on this particular piece. I hope you found it helpful. This really concludes with what I wanted to say here, that we can't just outsource the ownership of this to a vendor, okay? Or look what they're going to do in the future. But we have to make sure that we build the controls that go with it, because we own that risk and we're the ones protecting the client. We own it. It sits on our shoulders.
Any more than we can outsource our own brains, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, Rahul, Ben, you and I work on a lot of stuff together, and, you know, we constantly kind of check each other, right? Just to be able to see, you know, am I on the right track? Am I off base? What are the assumptions and things like that? So think of it as a subordinate, is a easy way to think of it. You know, would you have your subordinate send that without you checking? That's
and I
kind
love
of
that. I love that that methodology, John, and that example, because that really is, we've all now, because of AI, and as we use AI, we've become supervisors.
Right.
Right. But even the supervisor doesn't just let things go, whatever, right? Then they're completely back off. No, we're still accountable for the output. And we can become great supervisors. Awesome. Which means we're subject matter experts. Fantastic. But we still need to be very careful, because we own what goes out.
And
guys, I gotta go,
and
I'm so sorry to have to just separate myself, but thank you so much for the time and for the privilege of being able to share all of this with you. I hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Follow up. Andrea has a question. We'll follow up on email. Thanks, everybody.
Guys. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.